Hello friends, and welcome once again to confirmation class. This is really our first lesson. The last time was kind of an introduction to the course and what you can expect. Today we dive right into the assignments and a little instruction on what you read in your assignment from the Bible and from Manna and Mercy. So welcome, thanks for joining me. I hope you're all well. We're just going to jump right in here. So, okay, we're going to start by covering the material in the first chapter of Manna and Mercy. I wanted to go into some more detail about the biblical story that first chapter of Manna and Mercy summarizes. So I want to go through the 5 different stories that were assigned to you from the Bible. First, I want to just point out to you that there are 2 quite different creation stories in the Bible. The one that you read, the first one in Genesis 1, and then the second one in Genesis chapters 2 and 3. They were quite different in style and likely written quite a few years apart. The first one is the later one, and the much more older story is found in chapters 2 and 3. Now, even though they're quite different, they are complementary. They certainly don't contradict each other. So let's just start at the beginning. It's a good place to start. Genesis chapter 1 is so significant that the people who ultimately put the Bible together from all these different stories and all these things were written down over a long period of time, they decided that Genesis 1 was so important, that the material in this chapter was so important, they would put it at the very beginning of their book, describing God's story to mend the entire universe. That's how important this story was. And I'm sure you're all familiar with it. It talks about the story of creation that God made in 7 days. On the first day God did this, on the first day God did that. Now, the very first verse describes that when God created the heavens and the earth was a formless void and darkness covered the face of the deep. So there's already some stuff there for God to work with, but it is not ordered in any way. What God does in this first chapter of Genesis is to bring order to the stuff. And the stuff, the waters or the deep, you have to imagine it that it's just this mud and like this dirt and water and darkness all mixed together, and that's all there is. There's no space, there's no up or down, there's just this stuff. So God creates, God begins by blowing God's wind or spirit. It's the same word in Hebrew and Greek, wind or spirit, to begin to bring order to this chaos. God says, let there be light, and that's the first thing that God creates. From there, everything else comes. Now, God wants to create things, so what God does is God begins to order this stuff. First thing God does on the second day is to create a dome in the midst of the waters. So when the Bible uses this word create, it kind of has this meaning of carving out. So you have to imagine God gets in the middle of this stuff, this mud-like dark stuff, and starts carving out a space in the midst of it so that life can exist there. So God creates a dome. So there's this stuff, God gets in the middle of it, this stuff, God's in the middle, and then starts carving out a dome with a flat space on the bottom, right? So this is the dome in the middle of the stuff that God is creating, and then God creates this flat part on the bottom. Think of like a snow globe. It would be like the inside of a snow globe is what God is creating here, a space for life to exist. Okay, great. God calls the dome sky a good day's work. Okay, the third day. Let the waters be under the sky, be gathered together, let the dry land appear. Okay, so now God is taking this mud and he's going to separate out the wet parts from the dry parts, right? All right, and And so now there's more order going on. It calls the dry part earth and the wet part seas, and that's good. And then God starts creating plants, right? God partners with the earth to let vegetation, plants and stuff come forth, and all that good stuff. And that is another good day's work, the third day. Then God creates lights in the dome of the sky. So again, it's a dome. You have to imagine that the ancient peoples imagined this dome to the top part of the earth, and then God put like little lights like on tracks in this dome, and they went across the sky because ancient peoples watched the sky and they knew that stars moved across the sky. But there was also quite a large light that moved across the sky called the moon, and a much bigger light that moved across the sky in its track called the sun. And God does that to separate, again, light from darkness, and then that is the fourth day, another good day's work. Now come living creatures. So up to this point, God has created safe places for creatures to live. So now that the safe place is created, now that there's a food source in vegetation, God now begins to bring forth living things. There's dry land, there's water, there's vegetation, there's lights, there's nighttime for rest, everything's ready. So now God partners with the waters to bring forth swarms of living creatures. God brings forth birds to fill the sky, the dome. So creatures for the waters, creatures for the sky, and then creatures for the flat land. Great, very nice. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the waters, fill the land, fill the air. That's your job. That's a good day, the fifth day. Now God brings forth living creatures on the earth, cattle and creeping things, wild animals for the flat part. Great, and God saw that it was good. Then, the last thing God does, the culmination of God's creation, is to create human beings. And God says, let's create human beings in our image, in our very likeness. Human beings are made to be like God in their function. How is that so? Well, what do we know about God so far? What does it mean to be created in God's likeness? Well, so far, God has created safe places for living creatures, right? For living, all these diverse, vastly diverse creatures to live. That's what God does. So when God creates a partner to help God look after these living creatures, that is the human being's function, to help look after all the creatures in this creation and the creation itself, to create safe spaces for all these diverse living things. That's our job as human beings, according to this story. So God creates human beings in God's image. God blessed them and says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth. Because how are they going to look after the earth and all the creatures in it unless they fill the earth, unless they inhabit every part of it? So that is their job. And they can eat all the vegetables and the plants and the fruits for food. And they're vegetarians at this point. Great. That's a lot of work. So God takes the seventh day off, relaxes. God can take time off and the world doesn't fall apart, and you can take a day off and get some rest. Even human beings who are called to care for the earth, take a day off, rest, enjoy the earth, enjoy being alive. And it can start all over again. Creation isn't finished yet. God is partnering with the human beings to bring creation to its beautiful fulfillment or completion in justice, peace, and harmony. But for now, it's a pretty nice place, as you read on the first page of Manna and Mercy. So that's the first creation account. The second account, quite different. Starting in verse 4 of chapter 2, God makes the earth and the heavens, or the sky, the dome, and God needs somebody to help God look after it. So God plants a garden and takes a creature from the earth, from the mud, forms it into a human being, an earth creature, not yet a male or a female, but just an earth creature. And this is great. God breathes the breath of life into this earth creature so that he can partner with the earth creature to look after the Garden of Eden, it says. Great. And so God puts the earth creature in the garden to till it, to keep it, to help look after it. And great. However, God says, it is not good for the earth creature to be alone. No, it's not good. The earth creature is lonely. So then God creates all the different animals and creatures and brings them to the earth creature and presumably says, well, what do you think? Is this a good partner for you to help you in your work? And the earth creature kind of says, well, they're all very nice in their own ways, gives them names, but they're not quite, none of them is quite right. So then God puts the earth creature into a deep sleep. And in some of our translations, it says God takes a rib from the earth creature, but really it probably most likely means a side. He takes a whole side of the earth creature, creates another equal complementary creature. In Hebrew it says, creates an ezer kenegdo, a face-to-face, an equal, a companion to help the earth creature. And now one is a male and one is a female. The earth creature wakes up, sees its counterpart, and is overjoyed. At last, this is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called woman, for out of man was this one taken. So now there's a man and a woman, and they are meant to become one flesh. We are created for relationship and for working together to care for God's creation. So in the first 2 chapters of Genesis, this is what we learn about the purpose of human beings. Human beings are called to be partners with God and partners with one another, loving, equal partners to one another to help God look after the world and all its creatures. That is our function as human beings. To delight in one another, just like the earth creature delighted in the other creature, and to trust God that God will provide with them everything that they need. Well, it's all lovely, it's all great for, less than 1 chapter. And then the problem sets in. And the problem fundamentally is that the human beings don't trust God. The snake sows some doubt in their minds that listening to God is maybe always the best thing. And the snake also leads the human beings to distrust each other. Everything works great when human beings are not big deals to one another, when they don't seek to be better than anyone else, when they don't seek to be gods over anyone else, but when they're content to let God be God and to consider themselves the equals of others. The problem in the story in chapter 3 comes when they decide to become big deals over one another and to lord it over one another. This is when things start falling apart. They start not to trust God. They want to become like God, it says, right? And God catches wind of this. They eat the fruit that God asked them not to eat. They think they know better. The man says, well, the woman made me do it. The woman blames the snake. The snake made me do it. Soon there is all this discord where before there was harmony, and it all results from their wanting to be big deals, from them being wanting to be like God or gods over one another. That's where all trouble stems from, according to these stories in the Bible. There are consequences to this. The relationship between the man and the woman is disrupted. So now, even though men and women were equal in God's intended creation in the beginning, now there is disruption in their relationship, and men lord it over women as if they were gods over women, and that creates an entire history of sexism and of misogyny, of hatred of women, and it's all of its troubles throughout history. Their relationship with the land and with creatures becomes disrupted when they become gods over creatures rather than those who are set to care for them in creation. And so they have to leave this beautiful garden and stay outside of it, but God, importantly, still looks after them in the story and promises to care for them. Well, everything starts to unravel after that. It gets even worse. The first murder is shortly committed by Adam and Eve's children, by the first man and the first woman's children. Cain murders his brother Abel, maybe the ultimate way of becoming a god over somebody else, killing them, taking their life from them. Jealousy occurs. All kinds of terrible things start to happen. Everything starts to go awry. God sees that human beings and the human heart is nothing but wickedness. And God comes to a great decision that God would like to destroy the earth. As it says in the Manna and Mercy book, God thinks, well, maybe I should destroy creation, or at least human beings, but he cannot. God thinks about terrorizing human beings into submission to get them to get with the program and to get them to behave better to one another and to care for the earth. But then God thinks, well, that would just be using their methods, and I would become just a big deal, lording it over them like they are doing to one another. Well, God does destroy the earth, except he saves one family of Noah. And not only a few human beings to repopulate the earth once the flood goes down, but also 2 of every creature. God's care and concern extends not only to the human beings, but to the creatures in God's care. This way of dealing with things, God decided afterwards, was not the best way. This way of terrorizing, or this way of violence and destruction as a way of fixing things. Things are not totally fixed after this, and perhaps God realizes that it's because of the methods which were violent and coercive in this destructive violence of destroying the earth. And so, God makes a promise in Genesis 9, makes a promise to Noah, and God says, okay, here we go. Never again will I destroy the earth. And God says, as a sign to me, as a reminder to me that I should never deal with the earth and its peoples like that way again, I am going to hang a sign in the sky so that I might be reminded never to destroy the earth again. And of course, that sign, as we all know and learned from Sunday school from a very early age, is a beautiful, beautiful rainbow. So here's my not so beautiful rainbow, made just for you. It's about as good as I can do in this time with the materials at hand. There, God decides, there, I'm going to hang this rainbow in the sky. When I look at it, I'll remember my promise to you. Never again will I destroy the earth. Now, in Hebrew, as in English, the same word, bow, can be used for the thing in the sky and the weapon, like a bow and arrow, because they're both the same shape. So here God is hanging God's weapon in the sky, hanging it up, promises never to use it again, never again use the way of violence to get creation to where God wants it to be, that place of harmony and justice and peace that it was in the very beginning. God kind of has an aha moment and thinks, I will try another way. I'm going to try something different. And so God looks and sees one person named Abraham and says, I'm going to pick this person. I am going to establish a relationship of love and faithful care with this person and this person's family and this person's descendants, and through them I will bless these people with my love and care, and through them then blessing will come to the whole earth. Violence had filled the earth. People were big deals to one another, but God says, I will form a very special relationship of love with this person, his family, and his descendants. And through that blessing, these people will bring blessing to everyone on the whole planet. My blessing will come through this family to all peoples of the earth. And in that way, my creation will come to completion and to fulfillment as the beautiful place of justice and harmony and peace that it was intended to be. So when I'm teaching confirmation, I often draw this kind of diagram. Creation kind of starts out nice and high up here. Everything is beautiful. Everything is great. It's gorgeous. It's a place of harmony and order and peace. The people delight in one another. The first man and the woman delight in one another. They work with God, caring for the creatures of the earth and everything in it. But things spiral out of control very, very quickly. As I said, there's the first lie, or there's distrust. Shortly after that, there's the first murder. Then there's continued violence, and things just quickly spiral downwards. God tries to use the same methods of kind of violence and coercion in the flood to get people back to where God wants or would like to see things, but that doesn't work very well. And so God quickly settles on another way. God regrets destroying the earth and quickly settles on another way, which is the way of relationship and of faithful love. The way of intimate friendship with one person and that person's family, Abraham, and with the idea being then that blessing through this person and this family would come to all the earth. So God would bless this person, that person's family, bless the whole earth. So the rest of the Bible is that story, and we are not at the end of that story yet. The Bible contains a portion of that story. In that story, there are ups and downs. Sometimes things were great, sometimes not, but there is sort of an upward trajectory, and we are still somewhere on that upward trajectory, but it takes a long time. It takes a lot longer for God to get the world back to the place God wants it to be than it does for everything to unravel in the beginning. That occurs within the first 3 chapters of the Bible, and the first 12 really tell that whole story. And then everything after Genesis 12 is the story of the ups and downs of God and God's people, and the story to mend the entire universe. These first 12 chapters of Genesis are really, really important, and they are endlessly rich. I give you just the most briefest outline of that story. But what I would like you to take away from this is that there is an order to creation. God has ordered things. A lot of times, especially right now, it seems like things are in great disorder. We are going through a really difficult pandemic across the globe. We are experiencing racism and the effects of systemic racism in a way that we haven't in this part of the world for a long time. It's leading to violence and chaos. The good news in this story, this very, very old story, is that God is at work, always, always, always creating order, and God is always calling partners to partner with God in this work of creating safe places for all living things. Friends, this is the work you and I are called to. It's amazing work. And there is lots of hope because God has promised that this world is good and is made for a good end. We can all be friends. God desires above all to create safe places for diverse peoples to live together in harmony and peace, where they can delight in one another and learn from one another. This is God's dream, and the dream will come true. In many difficult parts of the history of God's people, people wondered, just like you and me, if God was still at work bringing order from all the chaos of the world. When they read these stories, they were comforted. and realize that God could be trusted to continue bringing order from difficulty, and that ultimately God's promise and God's dream would come true. So that's the first 12 chapters or so of Genesis. Thanks so much for following along this time. Thanks for doing your assignment. Thanks for reading the first chapter of Manna and Mercy and those 5 readings from the Bible. Next time we'll continue on with the second chapter of Manna and Mercy and some more assignments from the Bible. God be with you. I have lots of confidence and hope in you. Thank you for partnering with me at First Lutheran Church in responding to God's call to care for this world and every person and creature and plant in it. Have a good rest of the week. Until next time, bye-bye.